Hello everyone, my name is Hazel and in this workshop I'm going to be going through the Keyshot configurator. I'll take you through how to create the different elements that you can use to build that configurator, whether or not you want to do material variations or model variations, and then I'll go through the different output options that are available and the benefits of them and where they may be used within the design process itself. So why might you create a configurator of your scene? It could be that you want to showcase different concept ideas at the early stages of the design process, or even throughout the development stages. You may want to kind of show how the design has progressed or different components that could be applied to try and get sign off from team members or from stakeholders. And then when it comes to time to market, you may even want to kind of showcase these models on websites, allowing customers to kind of customize what they're about to buy. So for this demonstration, I'm going to be using this bike model. So I'm just going to unpause the screen. Now at the moment, I have already applied some materials to there. And if I go to the materials list underneath the scene tree, I can see that two of them I've just renamed to fork and frame, and they both have this blue symbol in the top right hand corner. Now this symbol shows me that these are multi-materials, and by this I mean that there are different material options that can be selected for that particular part. So for example, if I just double click on the frame option, I can see there's a list within here and I can just toggle between these to see what those different kind of material or color options are. Now to apply a multi-material, what you could do is you find the parts that you can have multiple options on. So in this case, I'm going to have different kind of leather elements, which is attached to the seat and the handlebars. I'm just going to edit that material, and then I can then start the multi-material list off by clicking on the multi-material button. Whatever material was already applied will then appear as the first one in that list. And I would recommend renaming this just to a shorter name, as this is what will then appear kind of in the configurator itself. So if you're showing this to someone kind of external to your company and they just really care about the color, you could just call it the color name within here. I'd also recommend renaming the top level name of the material, again, because that will be shown in the configuration. And it will then again also help people determine which elements of the model that they are manipulating. Okay, so to add more materials to the list, you can just drag and drop from the material library itself. If you hold down the Shift key, you can drag it onto the model, or you can drag it directly into the list itself. Okay, again, just going to rename that just so it's shorter for the list. Okay, so that's the kind of leather elements that I've added a multi-material to. And for this model, also the bottle holders are going to have a multi-material option. So again, I can double click on that to edit it. And for this one, at the moment, it's just a shiny plastic. I'm just going to add a slight bit of roughness to it so it scatters the light as it hits. And then I'm going to start that multi-material off. So again, I'm just going to rename it so it's clear in the configurator what I'm changing, and manipulate that first one just to a shorter name. Now, as this is now not a standard material, I can duplicate it. And what this will allow me to do is copy the details that I've put in and all the settings I've had, and then just change certain elements of it rather than having to rebuild them all from scratch. So I can click to say duplicate, rename it to what it's going to be, and then just change that element that's required. So in this case, I'm going to have a black holders, and we're going to also have some white ones. So again, just change the color there. Okay, and then again, I can then toggle between those, and it will then update in the real-time window so I can see what those changes are. So that's kind of how you can start to set up your multi-materials. So I've now got 4 materials within this scene that can be customized. The next thing I'm going to show you is how to set up model sets. So if I expand this double arrow here, it will show me a list of kind of all the model sets that are currently in the scene. Now at the moment it is just of the bike and all its components within there. If I wanted to have multiple bike options, what I could do now is I could import more models into this scene and make sure they are added onto their own individual model sets. This would then allow me in the configurator to toggle between them. So it'll turn one off and the next one on. If I wanted just to have certain components coming on and off, so it's just this one bike frame, but let's say the bottle holders can be toggled on and off, what I can do is bring it all in to begin with and then copy these into their own model sets. So if I, for example, select this back holder, I can then find it in the scene tree, right click to create a model set, give it a name, which will then be displayed in the configurator, and then start to build up the different model sets. What you'll find is that when you create a model set, it will hide the previous one or toggle it off and just display the one you've just created. So as we've got a couple to create, just toggle that bike back on and I can then do the same for the rest. So here I can say I want to have the front holder as well. Now a final option for the holders is maybe to have both of them displayed. So I can again bring that bike back in, select them so it locates it in the scene tree, select both holders and create that model set. Key is also to keep the link materials ticked, especially as these are multi-materials. If you unchecked that box, you'd then find it would duplicate all the materials in your list, and therefore when you came to the configurator, there'll be more options for the customer to change. With those three model sets disabled for now, and then the bike one enabled, we can still see the holders within there. So once you have removed the components from the list, it is best then to delete them from the parent model. Okay, so if I just select those ones, I can then locate the model tree and just delete them. Okay, so therefore, it is the case where I would have to toggle that model set on and off to be able to see them. Now I'm just going to do the same for the bottles. And these will then act as subcomponents to those holders. So for example, if you had selected that you wanted to have the back bottle holder, you've got the option of having the back bottle as well. I'm just going to do the same for the front bottle and then create a final one for both bottles, for if anyone ever picks to have both holders. And then like before when we did the holders, I'm going to go back to that original bike model set, select the two bottles and just delete them from the parent model. Okay. So that is kind of a method to be able to set up the component changes within a scene. Now, depending on the output that you select, you might want to try different kind of environment changes or different camera angles. So in this particular demo scene, I've already got some environments set up there. I've got a basic studio environment and then the storehouse environment with a background color, which you'll be able to find kind of in the material library. And I've also got a single camera angle. And as mentioned, one of the output options doesn't allow for kind of rotation. So if you wanted to showcase your models from different angles, it is best to set these up within the scene as well. So for example, I could set up another camera just from, let's say, the back view. And then we can combine the cameras and the environments in a studio. So if I open up the Studios tab, within here you can see there are different elements that you can apply into a studio. But if you're using this as part of the configurator, it is best just to stick to the camera and the environment options. If you start to add in model sets or multi-materials, you'll find that when you select that studio in the configurator, it will kind of also include the model set and multi-material that you've set within here, and it could therefore kind of disrupt any other selections that your customer may be choosing. So to create a studio, just click to say you want to add a studio in, and it will then kind of copy across what is currently in the render window. So if you wanted to change that at all, you can just do the drop-down toggle menus just to set it up. Remember to always render the thumbnail once you have got your settings, because the image that you see in the thumbnail is what will then be displayed in the configurator as well. Okay. So here I can have Studio 2 which I might just change the camera angle. And then the final studio I'm going to put in, again, I'm just going to go back to camera 1, so it's looking from the kind of front side. I might just change it to that storehouse with the background color. Now you can rename your studios as well, again, so it's shown in the configurator so people know what they're kind of selecting. And so just make sure you render the thumbnails so that the image reflects what is going to be shown. Okay, so there are all the elements that can be used to build your configurators. So now we're going to go through the configurator wizard. Okay, so I'll just start that wizard off. And you can see there's what you want to present is kind of the first menu that comes up. So if you just want model variations or material variations, you can select either of those. But in this case, as we have both in the scene, I'm just going to select that bottom one, so model and material variations. The next screen is picking what the parent model is. Now for this scene, the bike is the parent model and the holders and bottles are components of it. They are dependent on the bike. If it was a case of we had different bikes to choose from, if you're doing like concept work or anything, then they would all be classed as parent models because they are independent of one another. So the parent model selected, I can then go on to the next screen and then pick the components. In this case, all the remaining model sets are the components, so I can just say select all before going on to the next screen. So here I can start to add in component groups. So with the component groups, it's where you can then kind of group together certain elements. So I can say, right, for the bottle holders, you've got the option of picking both holders, the front, the back. You may even have like a none as an option, okay, depending on kind of what you want to customize. Then as part of the both holders, as an example, we can have a subcomponent group. So within here, you can then specify whether or not people want to see the model with both bottles in or still not have any in at all. I can just keep kind of adding these in. So again, for the front holder, I can have the front bottle and none. And then the same for the back. I can say the back bottle and none. So you can start to add your list up, and this also then limits what people can and can't select. So for example here, if I say I wanted to see the back holder, I don't get then the option to pick the front bottle. On the next screen, it then goes into the materials. All the multi-materials that have been set up in the scene itself are kind of displayed here. And if there were any extras that you wanted to add in, if you just kind of select that part, you could drag and drop more materials in here. These would then also add them to the multi-material list for that particular section as well. Once you've kind of confirmed that your multi-materials are in place, you can hit next and it will then take you to the material sets. Now, if all the materials are independent of one another, you can just hit next and go straight onto the studios option. If, however, it's a case of if they pick a certain color of frame, they have to have a certain color of fork. In this example, this is when you'd create a material set. So I'm going to do that now. I'm going to have it whereas the main bike, there's only a limited options for the frame and fork combinations. So here I can say next, and then on the next screen for material ways is when you can then set those up. So it's just a case of giving them names that are going to kind of translate across well to other people. So in this case, I'm just going to rename them all of the kind of color combinations that there are. And then using the radial buttons, selecting what these material ways are linked to. So for example, the blue patterned option will be a blue pattern frame with a blue fork. And if I just move this window out the way slightly, we can see that it is going to be updating the real-time window depending on what radial button I am selecting. In there. So I'm just going to create one for the grey fork and grey gradient framework. I'll just do one more, call it white gradient. There we go, for those ones. Okay, so there's the different material ways then set up. So when I hit next, it'll then take me to the studios. So depending on what output you want to use is whether or not you need to have the camera set up within there. So if, for example, I'm doing the web configurator rendered option, I would select all of these, so I can then toggle between the different camera views. But as you can see when I show the outputs later on, if I'm using the viewer, the camera angles aren't so important. So with those then selected, I can then hit next, and it'll then take me to the layout option. With the layout option, you've got kind of 3 different layout styles. The most common one to use is the panels option, and it is best to kind of go into like preview mode whilst on this screen, because then any changes that you make, you can visibly see how it is then affecting the kind of configurator. When you click to go into the preview mode, it will render the thumbnails for all the material options that are within there, because the model sets have already been done when you built them. Same with the studios, you've already done them. The material thumbnails are the only ones left to do. So you'll find that once that has complete, the presentation window will open up in the background, and then you can just kind of reposition this menu out of the way so you can see what changes you are. So I could say, actually, I don't want it to be horizontal, I want it to be vertical. And if I expand the interface, I can maybe like reduce the sizing down and kind of play around with the sizing of the thumbnails itself. Other things you're doing here as well is you can manipulate the styling. So if you wanted the selection to be like a different color, tailored more to your company colors, you can do. When you are happy with the changes you've made, you can then go out of the preview mode. And if you just click on next, it will then show you kind of a summary of all the selections that you've added in, whether or not there's the multi-materials, the models, and kind of how many parent and component groups that you've got within place. So from here, we can then start to look at the output options. We've got the ability to render the configurations. So if I click on that one, it will open up the render window for me, and it will jump me straight to the configurator. Here, you can then specify what you want the outputs to be. If you're just going to stick around with the still imagery, you can then say what you want to include. But if you want it to have the web configurator where it builds the HTML file at the same time, you can then just click to say web configurator, and again it will show you the number of images it will render out. So similar with all the other still imagery work that you can render from Keyshot, you can then specify the format as well as like the sample options or maximum time options. The other output options that you've got, if I just close these windows down, is from the file drop down. You could save the package file for using in the Keyshot viewer, or you could upload to the web viewer. So what I'm going to do now is just go through those different output options so you can see them. The first one I'm going to do is the Keyshot viewer. Now this is a standalone application, and it's free to download from the Keyshot website. And you don't need to have Keyshot running on your machine for this to work. All that it needs is that package file that's been saved out from Keyshot. So it's quite a good tool to use internally if you wanted to show off kind of any concept work or design development, because they may have access then to these package files on your local server. You don't need to email them out to anyone. Okay. Now with the Keyshot viewer itself, if I expand it, it will take me into the presentation mode, and it will kind of show me all the options that I set up. So the model options, whether or not I want the kind of bottle in place, and then kind of all the material choices that I'd set up as well within there. Okay, so I can just toggle between them to see kind of, as I said, the different variants. Now the Keyshot viewer does use the core processor power or the kind of graphics card of the machine it's on. So you will find there is a bit of cleanup time as it renders, but it does also allow you to rotate the model around if you wanted to see it from different angles. Okay. When you stop moving the model and making changes, it will clean up and it will give you the same render quality as it would be if you were in Keyshot. Okay, so that is the viewer itself. So I'm just going to exit out presentation mode. And the next one I'm going to show you is the web viewer. So it's a similar concept to the Keyshot viewer, which is the download. However, this one is all web-based and you will need a Keyshot subscription license to be able to use it. And the reason being is that it will then allow you to save your Keyshot scenes in the cloud, and then it will provide you then with a link which you can then send to people so they can view your models in a web browser, whether it's on a desktop or a mobile device. So this one is kind of more beneficial if you want to send it maybe outside of your company and they don't have access to the Keyshot Viewer standalone application, or they don't want to download it. All they need now is a web browser, and they can then toggle between the different model components maybe that you've changed, so they can see the variants there, similar with the kind of material variations. Okay, so I can, for example, just jump to that red pattern option. The final output option I'm going to show you is the Keyshot Web Configurator. So this is using those still images that you'd have rendered out of Keyshot. So it then compiles an HTML file, which you could just open up, or you can copy that into your web server page and upload the files. So therefore it's got your own company branding in there. So for this one, again, like before, you can kind of toggle between the different options that have been set up, whether or not they are the model variations or the color variations that you've got in place. But because this one is using all still images, it doesn't allow you to rotate. So this is where including the studios with the different camera angles and maybe the different environments can be more beneficial. So that is the Keyshot configurator, how to set it up, the elements required, and the output options. Thank you very much for listening.